Welcome back in to another episode of Offensively Accurate. I wanted to actually cover this yesterday, but I couldn't because my computer was acting like it was dying. So hopefully we don't have any of those issues today. Also, I pulled my mic back a little bit too. I noticed I was probably a little bit too loud last time, so forgive me. This new XLR mic is like a brand new experience for me. So I'm kind of playing with it and live testing different things to make sure I'm got the best quality audio coming out that I possibly can. But let me not bury the lead. I believe that Pete Hegseth is innocent. I believe that the accusation made against him are in bad faith. They come from a place of regret. Another kind of symptomatic thing what we see with the Me Too movement, and the reality, which is the fact that when there is no kind of disciplinary action or punishment for when a female makes a false accusation, they tend to happen a lot more frequently. In this case, it seems that this one resulted in the fact of settling in a suit to avoid any kind of further damage to reputation. Now, I read the entire police report on Pete Hegseth, and upon reading the entire police report, a lot of things became very clear. Now, again, I will say this too, because this is it's settled out of court. It was settled in court rather. But because of the way that this is going to play out, everything in here is going to be of my opinion, but it's going to be a rather strong opinion. And things became extremely clear, especially when you get towards the end of the police report. And I'll have it here as well to keep it up for you guys too, to be able to see for those who are watching. But one of the first things I want to point to with this is just the kind of reaction that we've seen. And I'll switch screens here. What we're getting is a lot of this kind of reaction to these individuals in this case here. So I have this bookmarked because I've seen many that are just like this, which is very confidently saying that Pete Hegseth is from Denise Wheeler. I have no idea who it is. 40,000 likes, almost 2 million views. Saying with the utmost confidence that Pete Hegseth raped a married Christian Republican woman at an event while her husband frantically searched for her. MAGA thinks that's cool. MAGA thinks holding a woman down and raping her is patriotic. It's why a serial rapist is their savior. Now, this is despicable for lots of reasons. One, this woman didn't read anything. She's probably just parroting some kind of, other emotional take that she saw on it. And obviously, it's coming from a left-wing position, so it's against MAGA. And it's obviously going to be against somebody who they dislike based on the policies that they're going to propose. And this seemingly happens a lot more often the closer, the higher somebody climbs in the political sphere. But just to give a kind of taste of how these things kind of are perceived, clearly that this is a popular take, seeing all the likes there as well. You can see there's 4,000 replies too, probably people who are going in and trying to dismantle some of the stuff, or at least provide a bit of evidence to why she's wrong here. And you can get, some of these here, right? You get these, but he says he was drunk and not responsible for anything, was intoxicated. And again, kind of just ridiculous. But you have Viva Fry here says, this is a definition of defamation per se. You deserve to get sued. And so he's holding out, all these different portions here. And it is defamation because if you look at the evidence that exists, nothing speaks to this at all. All of the evidence actually speaks to quite a different story that occurred. So let me go ahead and start by saying this, that one of the first things that I actually saw that related to this case that picked it back up and what made me want to kind of cover it a bit more was the fact that the lawyer for Pete Hegseth actually demands the release of file on another sexual assault claim that was made by the accuser, that she may have made similar false allegations against another man. Now, I won't go into the specifics there, but also to drudge up the fact that the accuser is someone who is doing so in bad faith. But we won't explore the specifics of that. We'll just stick to the actual accusation in itself. There were a lot of text messages that were being posted by, I believe, Colin Rugg and a few others who exist in this space to also kind of aid this argument that there was something extremely odd the more you look into this. And I will preface this by saying I think the overall situation is extremely humiliating for the husband, because I would imagine the husband has an idea of what occurred. It seems the husband is actually a bit forthcoming in regards to what he said to the police, and we'll get into the statements here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and load up the police report here. And hopefully it doesn't break my entire computer. And I know it's super bright too, so I'm kind of getting shine a light on here. And this is warning graphic. Let me go ahead and knock a couple of these out so I don't actually blow my computer up by trying to be on this. This is the document cloud. It was saved here. This is all, there's 15 pages, and then I think it was like 6 or 7 other pages of other summary reports here too. Now, where it's really going to start here is as you go through this, it says, warning graphic, and give it time to load here. There's a lot of redacted information. Obviously, this is the beginning of this is going to be the actual initiation, right? It talks about the nurse who first made contact when the initial accusation was made. So we're actually going to start down to page 10. So this is going to be covering, we're going to get to Jane Doe's initial statements here. So this is like page 5 here. And all of these are kind of follow-up and what the police were saying, in operations, what occurred and how it occurred, and how they got who reported to who in that initial report there. So we'll get past this. Maybe it's page 8 is where this is going to begin at. So it's a supplemental report is what we're seeing here, but just documenting all of the follow-up, right? You could see there on line 7 here on page, this would be page 1 of the first supplement 2 report. And so it's talking about this officer saying, he was assigned the follow-up investigation regarding a past tense sexual assault. He reviewed all reports associated with this case, and he learned that the victim, Jane Doe, had reported being sexually assaulted at the Hyatt Regency Monterey Hotel and Spa. And he goes on to give the location out there and name the suspect, and then all this information is redacted to obviously save all of the private information for everybody who's involved, going from employees, co-attendees of the meeting. They even protect the husband's identity as well, obviously, because he's connected to Jane Doe. Everybody besides Pete Hegseth, who the accusation is made against. So he also talks about the order of operations here, specifically in 42. He inquired about the hotel's video surveillance. And so again, he's compiling everything. So this is where we're going to start here. So on page 10, we're going to go to line 128 here. And this is from Jane Doe, all of her statements, right? So Jane Doe's story is essentially that she had observed Pete Hegseth, the initiation really rather, begins when after she had already had a couple drinks, and this is her story. And the initiation is that she was observing that Hegseth was acting inappropriately with other women at the conference. Hegseth was rubbing their legs, putting his hands on them, and that he was giving off a creeper vibe. This is also supported in the text messages as well, which is also included in this. The text messages, there's quite a few of them, and they have a lot of screenshots in here as well, which was also one of the key kind of giveaways here, that something was weirdly off by this. And we'll get to that when we get to the text messages. But some of the text messages just show that she repeatedly was texting her husband that she was noticing Hegseth do these things and how much of a douche he was coming off as. And at a certain point, it was just kind of like continually, that's all she was talking to her husband about. And you'll see why this begins to be a bit kind of puzzling the later we get into it. Now, at first, what's crazy is the way they kind of protect this information in the beginning of this report is that they actually kind of defend the husband's, like, you don't know it's her husband until you kind of read the entire report, the way they kind of protected the information. And even some other individual reports with Colin Rugg, I believe, was saying things such as like close male associate. But we can pretty much infer from everything here that it is the husband as well, the further we get along with what's going on here. And so her statement essentially is that, he was giving off these creeper vibes, and so that's what caught her attention. And then, she had earlier taken a picture with Hegseth because, again, he was a key speaker at this conference that they were attending it was either under the Republican or a MAGA, one of the two, but more so one that was, whether it was like a rally or more so just being an outspoken kind of conference about political values. That's what the overall occurrence was and why they were there. So she begins talking about how when she walked out of the bar, she assumes that Hegseth had followed her, and you can see this on line 105, and that she argued with Hegseth near the pool, and the argument was about Hegseth and what she was doing, and that she was calling him out for all of her actions, and that, Jane Doe remembers that Hegseth told her that he was a nice guy, as if like that was a defense, right? And so she says the next memory that she had was then she was in an unknown room. So it goes from she argued with Hegseth, she remembers that she argued with Hegseth, and then the next thing she says, she has no idea how she got to this room. And then all of a sudden, Hegseth is in the room with her. So there's clearly this big kind of chunk of time that's missing, right? Or at least a big kind of break in where she has a flow of sequential events that she can actually tell you what's going on. And so later on in 118, it says that her next memory is that she's on a bed, and that she could see Hegseth dog's tags. He was bare chested. She couldn't tell if he had his shirt off, and that she didn't notice any tattoos or anything, any kind of individual markers on Hegseth's body. But she also did say that she saw him fully nude during the incident. So it's kind of slightly conflicting there. And then she does say the next memory is that once she's in this room, she can remember seeing him naked. Next thing you know, she's like, he ejaculated on my stomach. And so sorry for being family friendly there, or unfamily friendly there. And then he threw a towel at her and asked if she was okay. And then she says the next memory that she has is when she walked into a room and then she got back into bed with redacted. So again, this is when her last memory is her climbing back into bed with her husband. She says she has no idea how she made it there. So there's no kind of even statement of hers that someone had guided her there. Hegseth walked her back, that she had just simply made it back. And again, this all kind of comes under the banner that she was intoxicated. Earlier statements of her talks about how she doesn't remember having that many drinks, but she was definitely intoxicated. Now, here's where we're going to get to some of the more kind of humiliating aspects and it'll make a lot more sense once we come full circle the closer we get to the end of the report here. And so on page 11, in line 136 here, the following Monday, Jane Doe says that she had sex with her husband. And again, it won't make sense here, but that's who this redacted individual is. So she has sex with her husband, and that the encounter with her husband triggered the memory of the incident with Hegseth. And then she also says that she used a condom when she had sex with her husband, because, and again, the rest is redacted. So the reason being, I'm not really understanding why. That's one of the first odd things, right? So after this incident, and for one thing, I'm a Christian, right? Why would you ever use protection or some form of protection when you're having sex relations with your wife? The entire point is procreation as well. People will say birth control and such. I just really don't believe in that. But it's one of the first odd things, right? It's like you're making your husband wear a condom, but then you don't remember this incident until 4 days later. So again, this is kind of building the evidence here. She's building the evidence here to say that she was so gone and so completely incoherent and drunk that like her memory didn't kick in of that even happening to her until she went to actually have a sexual encounter with her own husband. So again, the rest of this kind of follows that, she went to the hospital because that memory happened. She thought that she was assaulted from him. She also said that she showers daily, but then she had discharge from, vaginal discharge. And then she was also diagnosed with BV. And so the cop goes on to make a statement in this page in particular saying that based on his training, he knows that BV is caused by having multiple sex partners or having a new sex partner. So kind of a confirmation that she did indeed have sex relations with at least two different individuals, and that there's other factors that can cause it, but that being the leading cause. And so there's more circumstantial evidence there. And so Jane Doe also gave these clothes over that she wore on that day to the police department. And then she said that the clothes hadn't been washed since, and then they also talked about how the cop got more and more evidence from Jane Doe, which we'll see kind of kick in later on as he goes through the other witness testimony, to help corroborate what was occurring here. And so it shows, they talk about the picture and what Jane Doe is wearing, and again, redacting information to protect her identity. And so we're going to get some of these phone calls here, and these text messages. And so we're going to get them, and again, all this is redacted. And so the messages were between her husband and Jane Doe. And so they don't tell you that, but you can make it, you obviously can understand that as you read these text messages, which is you have to kind of, show the text messages as the evidence, but it's wild because you'd have to redact everything really in this entire, out of all these messages, if you wanted to protect the husband's identity. So it kind of becomes a null point, if you will. And so that between the husband, so you can see this conversation, they're going back and forth, dinner plans, the banquets, we just do whatever. And so the husband's kind of asking as he's there, he's not involved in this conference. He's kind of asking for confirmation of like what's going on. They redact, I believe, personal information about someone related or close to the family. And so it continues on. You see here, and you can see right here, my wife, how are things there? And she says, crazy still. And the husband responds, oh boo, at least everyone loves you. It's exhausting. And then she goes on, and here's where we start with the kind of texting about Pete Hegseth here. And she's like, do you know Pete Hegseth? And the guy says, name sounds familiar. Who is he? And so she goes on to explain he's a Fox contributor. And then he goes on to say, oh, okay. So it's kind of like, that's like the husband response. And, it's kind of typical when a wife begins to tell you about another guy. You're just like, why are you telling me about this? Like, why? It's always kind of a red flag, right? Especially presenting it in a way to a lot of husbands, they don't appreciate it, right? It feels kind of disrespectful that your wife may be just like opining over another husband, especially if you read this line here, and it might not be that easy to see. I can kind of zoom in, hopefully. Oh, unfortunately, it's probably not going to work. This bottom line here, though, says, anyway, our ladies are freaking drooling over him. It's one of the lines that says right there in the text messages. And he responds, oh, okay. So she just says he is TDB light, mini TDB. I'm not sure who that is. But the husband responds, oh, you mean the man who tried to have sex with my wife? Not a good first impression for Pete. And she responds, right? So she sends her picture of her, believe that it's Pete Hegseth who's speaking at the conference. She goes on to say he doesn't look even remotely familiar, but apparently all the women know who he is. So it kind of follows again in this track that she is just repeating the line of like, look at all these women who are obsessing over him. And then the husband responds, all the women watch Fox nonstop. At my worst, I never came close to that. She goes to say he wears a ring on his pointer finger and it creeps me out. He says, ew. And then she continues. He says, he talks pretty though. I'm going to be here all night. It's awful. In the Arena, book by Pete Hegseth. And so she continues on and he goes, oh God, they're all the same. They go, ha ha ha. And a lot of redacted information out of between these two. So you can't tell what's going on in this conversation at this point. But eventually she goes on to say, your male species I can't understand. So she's continuing this, like she's still kind of going on and on about like, oh, he's just such this, like he's this alpha Chad guy. Like, oh, look at him. He's such a narcissist guy. And then he goes on to say, of course you can. We want your vaginas. The husband responds, you just don't like it. And she says, ew. He says, exactly. Then she responds, okay, got to run for a while. Text you when I can. Love you. And then he says, love you. So there's like a first bit of like, that's the way you'd kind of communicate husband and wife, right? Like, love you. But here's the point where you know that it's the husband and the kids, because the following line after he says, love you, think we can do s'mores or shall I continue winding them down? Now, most people who are parents would come to understand that as like, are you going to come back in time to have s'mores with us, or should I put the kids to bed? Like, are you not going to make it back in time for this? Should I put them to bed at this point? And so really that's like the hard point of the text message here, confirming that that's the husband with the kids. And we'll later on find out that the husband and the kids were at the same hotel when we get to the hotel testimony. But obviously that was earlier too, when Jane Doe says that she went back to the room with redacted. But the further you get along with this, you build it up and you say, hey, that makes sense now. This is the husband who she's speaking with, and he's at the hotel, probably in some other portion of it, just with the family, with the kids, wanting to be close to the wife while she's at this conference, right? Keeping the family together. And so there's not much that really goes on here, just that she keeps talking like Pete just ended. Okay, heart face. And then she says, we're on ways and means now. And then she responds here. So this is where the kind of like the breakup of the text communications happen between the husband. Like she's, we showed that tweet earlier where it's like the husband was frantically searching for her. That's not at all true. It was really more so that he was just concerned by the way that she wasn't responding to him. And so here you can tell that the husband fell asleep because she responds, hi, baby, still at the whatever party, redacted party. How's it going there? And then she follows it up because he probably didn't respond quick enough by saying, I sincerely hope you're sleeping. I'm still at redacted party. They're going strong. And then again, and you can see that little time gap there. So again, another long period, she responds again. Okay, well, I love you so much. I'm headed to the bar with CFRW ladies missing you. So probably the conference ladies who were there. Then the husband finally responds by saying, hi, beautiful. I did fall asleep, but woke up redacted. I would imagine that information relates to the kids. And he responds, have fun. Love you so much. Then she responds immediately here saying, oh my gosh, I have so much to tell you. Smiley face from the husband. Then she responds again. This Pete dude is a TBD too. And so she's again bringing up Pete Hegseth in like a matter of like just like a couple hours here over this text conversation. And that TBD was a reference to apparently some other guy who this wife had met that wanted to have sex with her. And again, why she's kind of like harping on this to her husband, I'm really not sure. But he goes, uh-oh, how's that? And she responds, I'll tell you about it when I get back, hopefully soon. And so he responds, holy smokes, lady, I don't remember the last time you were socializing at nearly 2 a.m. And so from this conversation, even from itself to the text messages, nothing comes off to me really as more than just maybe having a beer or two. Like if I was to just look at it from the frame of someone texting these messages from Jane Doe's perspective, I don't see much that kind of really speaks to someone being heavily intoxicated. I would imagine a lot more kind of like nonsensical statements, or maybe a lot more rapid messaging. But she seems to be responding in kind, not many mistakes. But again, that's all kind of circumstantial evidence. She responds, I know, I got to make sure that too, to the guy saying, I can't believe you're up at this late. And he says, that foe, doing okay, my love, worried about you. And so obviously she didn't respond at this point. And so again, we get this next message that comes later on, and I can't make out that time there, but it looks like it's around like 9 in the morning. That's what it is. So the next day at 9 in the morning, she finally responds, Boko, my dumb watch was plugged in all night and it's only at 7% battery. Hope there's nothing wrong with it. Uh-oh, me too. It's not very old. So this is kind of the next morning. So she had made it back to the her room, her hotel room by this point. And this is a message that's at the end of the morning. So really the main point here is worried about you, right? So this is the last when the husband texts. So she doesn't respond until after she'd already made it back to the room in the morning the next day. So when we're on here on page 16, this is the, must have fallen asleep, right? And so this is actually going to be the husband testimony here. And so this is when the cop spoke with the husband, redacted via telephone, redacted again, providing me with the following information. To the husband, and again, I'm just going to use that in place of saying redacted. And what's up, Roy? Nice to see you. The husband stated that he was at the hotel and spa with Jane Doe and blank blank. So you can infer then from the text messages and the further redacted information that would be the children, especially with the text message saying, are we still doing s'mores, and winding them down. And Jane Doe were very close and wanted to be with his family. So it doesn't explicitly say husband here because you then have to redact that because it would obviously give up the identity of who this person was, or at least a close relationship. And I'm not really sure why they didn't say husband when they redacted everything else. But you can probably kind of connect dots maybe in ways I'm not really thinking about right now. Jane Doe had business at the hotel. So what we inferred from earlier is that the husband and kids are here with the wife, just at a different portion of the hotel while she takes care of business. And so he goes on to say that Jane Doe was busy with the conference and the husband was in the hotel room, redacted. The husband stated, the room there. The husband stated that Jane Doe had gone to their hotel room at approximately 1700 hours while on a break. So it's like the last time he saw her. And then he said that Jane Doe did not seem intoxicated. Jane Doe had left the room and went back to work. So then again, if we go here, the husband states that Jane Doe is in communication with him via text messages, which is what we had just read there earlier. And so he states that he fell asleep and woke up after midnight at approximately midnight, and that they texted some more, and that Jane Doe told him that she was at the bar and was out with the woman. So he says around 12:30 that Jane Doe stopped texting the husband and that the husband is worried about her. The husband was reading the news and made him even more worried for her safety, which I'm not sure what that kind of inclination is there. Maybe something happened that day that I'm not aware of around that area. And that approximately at 2 a.m., the husband stated that he had left the room and went to look for her at the bar. The husband stated that there was no one at the bar when he arrived there, so the husband went back to his room. So at approximately at 4 a.m. now, Jane Doe finally came back to the hotel room. That she accessed the room on her own and she used the key card reader to get in. Jane Doe, so not really someone who's completely like intoxicated, right? Who can't even figure out like to get their card in. She was clearly reminiscent or with it enough to be able to get back into the room on her own. You've seen kind of these funny stories where people be slept outside their hotel room even when they had their key when they're pretty drunk. And so Jane Doe told her husband that she must have fallen asleep. Jane Doe was apologetic. And this is where we're going to get first into kind of breaking down and conflicting reports here. The husband noticed that Jane Doe did not have a hard time walking and was not slurring her words. So that's the first point, even from the husband himself, stating that when he had contact with Jane Doe at 4 a.m., that she did not have a hard time walking, wasn't slurring her words, So there was not a giveaway to him that she was under the influence or incoherent. So on Wednesday, following after this is when Jane Doe told the husband that she was assaulted. And so if we remember from what occurred on 10/11, I believe this would have been after when she had the reminiscent experience memory of like, this has actually occurred to her. This is a few days later. And that Jane Doe did not tell the husband many details. And then it goes on the next day that the cop had further communications with Jane Doe. And then that Jane Doe further stated, and this is a supplemental report here, that Jane Doe stated that she remembered asking Hegseth if he had a condom when the incident occurred. So she kind of adds to the back end of her story in a later kind of, in a meeting with this cop or this investigator, adding to the fact that actually, no, I do remember having this extra bit of piece of information when this occurred, which may be common, right, if we were to believe that story. And so he spoke to the husband. The husband wanted the cop, to know that Jane Doe would cry secretly and had very little energy, and out of the blue, she would cry. So kind of like these signs of like, oh no, a traumatic experience. Jane Doe had also bought new clothes because she wanted to make sure that her body was completely covered. And so kind of having that maybe traumatic experience, right? Where like, I wanted no one to ever look at me like I feel like I was used or an object, and this is me kind of playing on like if we're to believe what she says to be truth. And so just to connect this here, we're going to be on 270, page 17. I want to connect back to my notes here. Okay. And so this is when the investigator on the 20th is getting back with the hotel and contacting individuals about the the camera locations in the surveillance video. And so he talks about how Redacted, which is an employee now, so now Redacted is going to be an employee. So this Redacted employee escorted him to a room and looked adjacent to the front lobby and gave him access to the camera system. He reviewed the surveillance video with Redacted, and it was determined by the video timestamp was slow by 15 minutes. So they just make that to show that the video timestamps were off from what they were reporting. It's kind of minor there. And so he says he asked Redacted if there were reports of a disturbance. And so the employee references that there was an actual documentation of a disturbance between two individuals near a pool. So this goes back to the initial thing when Jane Doe had stated that she had argued with Pete Hegseth at the pool. But this is going to get conflicting because that's not what the employee is going to say had happened. She requested, or the cop, the investigator, requests to speak with the employee who made this disturbance report, who was later identified as Redacted. And so while he was waiting for Redacted, he found surveillance footage that showed both Jane Doe and Hegseth and a third unknown female walk into the hotel lobby and towards the bar together. So at this point in time, Jane Doe and Hegseth and another female are all together, walking together. The camera timestamp was around 10:17 at 23:58 hours. So this would be just before midnight. And that the three were walking straight and on their own. So again, no sign of incoherence here or overt intoxication. Redacted arrived on the scene. He showed a video of Jane Doe and Hegseth walking into the lobby, and the employee stated that he remembered the two. The employee provided him with the following information. So if we go down here, forgive me, make sure I find it correctly. Okay, two separate guests in building 4. They called the front desk because they complained about a couple near the pool who were causing a disturbance and were being loud. And so the employee contacted the security, but they were busy. Redacted said that he left the lobby and headed to the pool to take care of it himself. And so upon arrival, Redacted contacted Jane Doe and Hegseth near the pool. So he makes physical contact with them when he's going out there to speak to them and say, hey, kind of tone it down. The pool is located near building 4 and 5. The employee stated that Hegseth began to curse at Redacted, when he contacted Jane Doe and Hegseth. Hegseth told the employee that he had freedom of speech and that Jane Doe intervened and told the employee that they were Republicans and apologized for Hegseth's actions. The employee stated that Jane Doe placed her arm and hand on the back of Hegseth and escorted him towards building 4 and 5. The employee says that he watched Hegseth and Jane Doe disappear into the area of building 5. Now remember, then this is the point where the employee loses contact there. He says he goes back to the lobby. According to Jane Doe, this is where her story breaks off. This is where she says that she remembers arguing with Hegseth at the pool, although it seems that she wasn't arguing with Hegseth at the pool, but that it was Hegseth was just being rather loud. And then Jane Doe actually apologizes for what Hegseth is doing to the employee. And then she escorts Hegseth, according to the employee, to the area of Building 5, conflicting the fact that, or rather showing a bit of coherence here, where she actually earlier stated that she didn't remember what happened from the pool to how she got to this unknown room. But the employee states, allegedly, that she actually escorted him herself. The employee goes on to state that Hegseth was actually very intoxicated. The employee stated that Jane Doe was not intoxicated, was standing on her own, and was very coherent. And again, now this is two individuals, right? So we have the husband saying at 4 a.m. that he didn't notice anything of her being intoxicated or slurring her words or any kind of incoherence. And the employee being able to make the comparison that Hegseth was very intoxicated, but rather Jane Doe was not intoxicated by any means, and that she was standing fine and was very coherent. And obviously, by the fact of having the contact there, she's probably apologizing for the fact that Hegseth is probably wasted at this point afterwards, after being the key speaker previously and earlier, which what led to them going to the bar. And so, if we continue down, right, so we have here with the bartender saying that the difference in intoxication. And so if we go down to 296, which is going to be right here. And so the investigator continues to search the video surveillance footage, and that there was additional footage of both Jane Doe and Hegseth together, showing that Jane Doe and Hegseth walked from the exit of Knuckles Bar, and the video showed them walking together with arms locked together, with Hegseth seemingly talking and Jane Doe smiling. So they're also holding arms and walking together. He says both did not have an unsteady gait. So on the video surveillance footage, also poking at the fact that they seem both coherent and also not intoxicated. And then they see that they walked out of the lobby with their arms locked, headed towards the pool. So they went from the bar area to the pool area, arms locked, with her smiling at him. Obviously kind of differing, not only just from her own testimony to the police, but differing from what she was saying also to the messages to her husband as well. And so the timestamp for that was on the 10/18 at approximately 1 a.m., so 1:15 in the morning. And that there was no video footage inside the bar and near the pool, just from the entryway that they saw going back and forth. And so let me make sure I'm following here too. Okay, so this is on this page as well. We're going to have another attendee give testimony. So at page 18, 326, this is redacted, okay? And so this is giving the preliminary information of how this co-attendee, and it's a female, stated she knew that Jane Doe from redacted again. And so it says that this member was also there, and she was the attendee of a conference the Federation was holding. This one is where it gets a little more eye-opening. So this is an attendee, so someone who's there on business, the same way with Jane Doe would be, and that the key speaker was Hegseth. And so the unknown female attendee stated the conference had an after party, and that she remembers seeing Jane Doe consume a singular glass of champagne and some vodka at the party. But she stated that Jane Doe did not seem intoxicated, but had a buzz. The female attendee said that a group of people went to the bar after the after party, and part of the group was herself, which is why it's redacted, Jane Doe and Hegseth. So the female attendees said that Jane Doe herself and Hegseth were in their own group of conversation while at the bar. The attendee said she witnessed that Jane Doe and redacted flirt with Hegseth, so another female there. And the flirting consisted of touching of the body or the arm. So again, all of this kind of is poking at the fact of going against what she was saying in her text messages to her husband, which was, oh, this guy's such a douche. Oh, like, men are just so trash. Look at all these guys and how they do all this. And meanwhile, while she's sending all these messages, or the lead up to sending these messages, she's now arms locked, walking around with Hegseth, defending him for being, drunk and obnoxious, flirting with him from what is this other testimony here, and also like smiling at him, like visibly smiling at him on surveillance footage we have in this video. And so the female attendee stated that she was sitting at the bar and she did not hear Jane Doe redacted in Hegseth's conversations. There's another person here. And that the three of them sat together and were exclusive in conversation. Redacted didn't know if Jane Doe and Hegseth left the bar together, Redacted stated she saw Jane Doe have one beverage at the bar, so we can at least assume from all this evidence circumstantially that there's been 3 drinks consumed by Jane Doe. The female attendee also stated that Doe did not seem intoxicated to a point where she would not be able to care for her own safety, and that she was coherent. This is now the 3rd individual who has stated that she was coherent at these events as they're happening, even while also saying that they saw her having drinks. So that's now the husband at 4 a.m., the employee at the meetup at the pool, and now at the bar with this female attendee. So 3 different points of time and 3 different witness testimonies saying that Jane Doe was coherent, like she was not visibly intoxicated, not the way you would say someone is at least drunk, right? And she even explicitly says it not being able to take care of her own safety. This seems kind of very specific. So he goes on that he gets copies of video surveillance footage via email that he downloaded, the investigator, more footage. And so now he has contact with this unknown 3rd female, and that's right, it's redacted. So now we're going to say unknown 3rd female who was in exclusive conversation, who was also seen by this other female attendee at this conference. And so this other unknown female is also another attendee at this conference, and she was there for the conference, and she's affiliated with some kind of redacted group and why she's there. So after the conference, there was an after party at the president's suite that was occupied by redacted, again, probably someone else involved in this year, and it was a birthday party for someone too. And that there were several suites associated to the after party. So clearly a very kind of celebratory time. Everyone's kind of celebrating. It's already a conference, and getting to know a bunch of people, having icebreakers and such. And after the party, redacted had taken a picture of Hegseth and Doe together. The photo was then sent to Jane Doe via email, and that redacted was referring to the picture attached to this case report, and there were alcoholic beverages at the party. This attendee, this unknown 3rd female, stated that she wore blank and walked into the hotel lobby with Hegseth and Jane Doe. And so that's the point where you can connect it to the video surveillance footage when she walked in with them, who were exclusive when they were in the bar. And that redacted was the female, and again, that's the explicit portion right here. So redacted, the female attendee, the unknown 3rd female, was the female seen on the video with Jane Doe and Hegseth. And while at the bar, Hegseth sat next to her, not Jane Doe. They had drinks at the bar and they talked. During the conversation, this 3rd unknown female said that Hegseth put his hand on her knee, and she made it clear that his hand on her knee was not acceptable, and despite the touching, she stated she was not uncomfortable. She stated Hegseth had invited her back to his hotel room, and that she stated she politely declined the invitation. So here we have Hegseth is actually hitting not on Jane Doe, or making advances not on Jane Doe. He's making advances on this unknown 3rd female. And it continues here that she got the attention of Jane Doe, and she had Jane Doe become a crotch blocker, which again, for most people, that is kind of the PG terminology here. But it's someone who's going to prevent a 3rd party from trying to have sexual relations with you, right? People, they commonly would say cock blocker, right? It's someone that comes in the way and does something to prevent or break the atmosphere, so that sexual tension kind of dissipates. And so she says, by having Jane Doe join her and Hegseth's conversation, she was hoping that Jane Doe's presence would detour Hegseth's attempt to have sex with her. The bar began to close, and she left the bar. Now, the way it kind of words this, it also makes me think that it might be referring to that other female previously. There's kind of conflicting things, and a lot of this is redacted. But what we can make sense of here, though, is that Jane Doe was brought into this kind of a conversation, this atmosphere, to be a barrier against Hegseth and this other female that he was making advances towards. So the bar begins to close, and that she left the bar. She stated a group of people left the bar together, and she didn't know if Jane Doe and Hegseth were amongst those people. She said that she didn't pay attention to Hegseth and Jane Doe when she left the bar. And she stated, and again, now this is the 4th person, that Jane Doe did not look or act intoxicated when she had last had contact with Jane Doe. So now there's 4 individual people saying that Jane Doe did not even look or act intoxicated. And the other lady explicitly saying, she seemed that she could definitely take care of her own safety. And so now the female attendee walked back to her room and she talked to her roommate, redacted. And she told her roommate that Hegseth had touched her knee and asked her to go back to his room. So she also is kind of making the point that she told someone else that night that Hegseth had done this for confirmation there. And that when she, and this is the part that's wild. So later that morning, when redacted, again, the female attendee attended the conference and saw Jane Doe, Jane Doe did not seem any different and was her normal self. Jane Doe did not act like someone who was hung over. So this is the following day when she saw her again. So this is later that morning of the 10/18 when the conference is ongoing for a couple of days. That Jane Doe didn't seem any different, and she was completely fine when she saw her following the events of what Jane Doe said was the sexual assault. So again, not any further evidence to point to the fact that she wasn't intoxicated and was coherent through this sequence of events that we're discussing. And so, redacted again. So this female kind of attendee hands over a phone number to another individual, and that this other individual also shared contact with Hegseth and these other attendees at this conference who were all there. And so at the bar, Redacted and Hegseth engaged in conversation, and Redacted told Redacted, again, the roommate here, that Hegseth asked something to the effect of wanting to go back to his room, and that they denied, and that there was also mention of Hegseth placing his hand on her knee. So that was kind of the follow-up to the individual, the roommate of the person who claimed this, also confirming that she did say that on this event at this time. So now we're going to get to when the investigator talks with Hegseth. Now this is going to be Hegseth's story here. And so one of the first portions here is that Hegseth is going to talk about how he remembered being led away from the bar by someone. So we're going to go down here. This is the preliminary information again. This is Hegseth here. Hegseth stating that he did not drink hard alcohol, but consumed beer at the after party. The individual that attended the after party were people he had never met before, so no previous communications with these people, so all different. Make sure I got this right here. It says 431, so I'll make sure here. Okay, we're going to go down here. And so he said that no one was at the bar, was blacked out drunk. So if anything, he was probably the most intoxicated of everybody there then. On 431, line 431, that Hegseth stated he remembered being led from the bar by somebody. He stated that he was buzzed, but not intoxicated. Hegseth did not know who was leading him from the bar. Hegseth described the person's clothing. The person wore, and again it redacts it, the cop says that Hegseth described Jane Doe's dress, which again, from earlier in this police report, they have that dress from that day that Jane Doe said that she never washed. So Hegseth, on days later, right, see if you can mark this here, so this is on the 26th, right? So we're talking almost like 15 days after the event had happened, almost like maybe 19 days actually, if I remember correctly, if it happened on the 7th, that Hegseth was able to accurately say what this person's clothing looked like in this follow-up investigation, right? So he clearly was like remembering specifically who this person was, and it was Jane Doe who led him from the bar. That's what Hegseth is alleging in the statement here. And that he doesn't remember being chastised for being too loud, and he didn't remember an argument by the pool. So again, that kind of speaks to he was so intoxicated that he really doesn't remember that beef that happened at the pool. So who's to say really, with all the conflicting reports, was he just yelling at somebody about politics? Was he getting into it with somebody? It does seem unlikely with the evidence leading up to this that it was between Jane Doe and Hegseth. If Jane Doe apologized for him, and all the employees stating that he was intoxicated, so more rather that he was going on opining on something rather, and that he doesn't. Hegseth also says he doesn't remember being belligerent with anyone. And so on 443, we'll skip down here. Hegseth advised he went back to his hotel room with Jane Doe. So he's saying that that's how they went from the pool to the hotel room, and that Jane Doe was the one who led him there. Hegseth thought it was odd that Jane Doe stayed in his room. She sat down in the room and did not leave. Hegseth stated that Jane Doe and himself did not do much talking at the bar, which speaks back to what earlier, which is that Jane Doe wasn't brought into this conversation until that lady wanted to tag her in as being a crotch blocker because Hegseth was making advances on another female. And so Hegseth stated that he did more talking to a, redacted woman at the bar. Hegseth stated that Jane Doe might have felt she was in charge and that had led Hegseth to his room. Hegseth stated that there was nothing in his mind that thought he was going to take Jane Doe home, and he said it wasn't even a thought. He might have thought that was someone else, but not Jane Doe. Hegseth said he was confused by Jane Doe staying in his room. While in Hegseth's room, he stated that things progressed between himself and Jane Doe, that the interaction between Hegseth and Jane Doe was consensual, that there were a couple of times that he made sure that she was comfortable with what was going on between the two of them. Hegseth stated that there was always conversation and was always consensual contact between the both of them. Hegseth stated that the engagement between himself and Jane Doe was mutual, that they would both stop and say, "We shouldn't do this." Now again, both Hegseth and Jane Doe are married at this point in time. Hegseth actually, literally like a couple months before this date and time, had just given birth to his first child in his third marriage. And obviously, with the preliminary evidence we saw earlier, Jane Doe's husband was at the hotel while this is happening, probably just a couple buildings over. But things consensually continued. Hegseth advised Jane Doe that Jane Doe had asked if he had a condom. Hegseth said no, he did not. Hegseth told her that they could stop if it was a problem. Hegseth stated Jane Doe said, no, it's not a problem. Hegseth said he did not want to get anyone pregnant. Now, this is where you're going to see some of these memes being made online of why this is extremely humiliating. If you were to believe full-heartedly that these are false accusations, which I do believe Hegseth is innocent. She states that she makes her husband wear a condom, but in this incident, if you were to believe the evidence and all the other four witnesses here, that she was completely coherent, maybe was only slightly buzzed, capable of making rational decisions and wasn't gone, that she was fully fine with Hegseth not wearing a condom during this sexual relation, but not her husband. Very strikingly odd, very humiliating, which also, I believe, which is why the husband possibly was a bit forthcoming with the police about him not noticing that she was intoxicated. Or maybe he didn't realize why they were asking that, but at least he was honest with them. Hegseth said, and again, talk about the positions they did, and then Hegseth also confirms that he did ejaculate on her body, right? A bit graphic, I apologize. Afterwards, Hegseth said that it was very early in the morning and that there was a very clear conversation with Doe. Doe stated that she would tell her husband that she fell asleep on a couch in someone else's room. Hegseth continually asked Jane Doe if she was okay because he did not want Jane Doe to get in trouble. Hegseth told Jane Doe that she should not have to worry about him saying anything, and that Hegseth stated Jane Doe showed early signs of regret, and that Hegseth did not elaborate on these early signs. So the cop then provides Hegseth with his contact information, and obviously to give any further information, and then he follows it up with Hegseth wanted to add that after he had sex with Jane Doe, he told Jane Doe that she could take a shower, but that she declined the offer. So that's even more kind of disgusting, is that she had this, if you're to believe that she was fully coherent, that she has this happen. She goes home and crawls in bed after being had by another man with her husband. Extremely, extremely humiliating. Now, that is at the end of the police report. Now, obviously, I have my opinions, but I think it becomes abundantly clear when you read through the investigator report in this long, police report here, that the abundance of evidence is clearly against her actual side of the story, Jane Doe's side of the story, that she remembers nothing, that she was intoxicated, and that this was non-consensual. I think all the things, if you combine the text messages, you combine the lack of evidence that she was intoxicated by any point, all point to the fact that it was kind of she was attracted to Pete Hegseth clearly and wanted to kind of void herself of guilt by sending messages to her husband of being like, oh yeah, like no, like I could never like a guy like this. Oh, no way, honey. Man, he's just like that other guy who wanted to have sex with me. And I bring that up too because it makes me think, is that going to be correlated to the Hegseth's lawyer asking for evidence on another accusation that this same Jane Doe has made previously? And so that she's had a history of making these kind of decisions. And if you, and another thing too is it's like this isn't to say that Pete Hegseth is this moral person in this situation. He clearly cheated on his wife in this situation too, which is why he says there's literally you have no worry of me saying anything to my wife. Obviously, I wanted it to be public for any reason. And this is why it's very despicable when you see these posts that I showed earlier on this of these females who are raging at the fact of like, oh, Hegseth raped this woman. When if you look at the evidence from the police report and everything gathered from the summary reports here by the investigators, nothing speaks to that at all. Like literally at all. Now, obviously, Hegseth's statements are going to be obviously he didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do nothing. But when you combine, I think it's most specifically the way the text messages seem very obsessive with who Pete Hegseth is, and kind of trying to get her husband to like, oh yeah, I think Hegseth is bad. Kind of like that's going to help you by any means, but that kind of shows early signs of like maybe guilt that she was clearly attracted to this kind of man. So she was trying to send messages to kind of like help alleviate any concern her husband may have, which is odd because it's just like, I think that kind of raises concerns. It does the opposite, has the opposite effect. But when you look at the fact that Hegseth was clearly intoxicated by multiple people, and then other witnesses say that she was definitely not intoxicated and was very coherent, I think it tells the story of this woman regretted what she did. This woman wanted to go and cry, he did this to me, obviously, because if you then have to be open about publicly owning the fact that you lied to your husband, you literally had sex with a complete stranger on a night, well, not a complete stranger, but like a popular stranger, while your husband and children are like, blocks away, like a couple minutes walk away. I mean, you are a very despicable person, especially in the highlight of doing it at a Republican conference, MAGA, right? The Republican Party, it's supposed to be like, you're supposed to be some of these like very moral champions of people who are like, and this is what we're going to do with this country. And like, you do all of this, you have such a kind of fallout here. It's embarrassing. It's going to blow up your marriage. I mean, you just like, you do things that just destroy yourself, not even just your husband's eyes, but to have something public like that. And then your children, depending how old they are, I mean, they're going to see some of this too. The fallout's not going to just affect just the two individuals there, your mother, your father, all the people in the extended family. And so I think it follows a trope of what we've seen, which is because there is no actual disciplinary lever to operate against false accusations, she was just hoping that it would stick. It would get carried by the Me Too movement and the feminists that believe all women, no matter what evidence may sit there, and in some kind of attempt to void herself out of any culpability that she actually did all of this consensually. I think it's rather unfortunate, and it's a recurring pattern. It happens over and over and over and over and over again. It's not to say any woman who cries this is lying or making something up because she regrets a choice, but man, anytime it happens to like a what do you call that? Like a higher up, like kind of celebrity, whether they're A, B, C, or D tier, it seems that more often than not now, the ones that are high level cases that come into politics or even like Hollywood and such are because in football too, like sports as well, that these women actually just regret the choices they made and they want a way to be able to try to save their marriage, right? And I just feel bad for the husband. I really do. Like, that's one of the most emasculating, humiliating things I could ever imagine happen, where you come with your children to go support your wife to go do this because your wife is a boss girl. And what does this boss girl do to you? She goes bang some douchebag Chad while you're taking care of the kids, hoping that your wife comes back. You even go out and searching for her, but she's lying about where she's at. She's lying about the likeness of this individual. And she climbs into bed after being had by this man, covered in all of that stuff. I'm going to probably use a towel and whatnot, but having sex there and the like. And then you crawl back into bed with your husband. Like, that is so humiliating. That is so emasculating. And now everything is public about this. So now a bad decision gets driven even higher into the escalon really of news and media, because this guy, Pete Hegseth, is getting nominated by Trump to a high-level cabinet position. And now all of this comes out now. And now your husband can't escape it. Now, I would imagine the husband already knows at this point what happened there. He probably had a feeling what happened that night when it did happen. The unfortunate thing, though, is that there's people involved in this. Pete Hegseth is no moral champion either. He cheated on his own wife. This is like his third marriage now that Pete Hegseth has been involved in. But really, if we're just looking at the truth of the matter, is that these accusations, if you look at all the evidence, are entirely bogus. I believe that with my entire heart and being. And what's wild is earlier today, which I don't have it on hand right now, is that we got word from Leading Report that no one now is blocking Pete Hegseth's nomination. And I think that's because people have been circulating the full report and the evidence of what's going on. And it is so obviously, clearly a sham that there's no leg to stand on to oppose Pete Hegseth with. Like, yeah, you can say, wow, he's not that good of a guy, but like, that's not good enough, right? That's not a strong enough thing like what they had with Matt Gaetz and that other operation that they had. It's just not. There's too much that points to the opposite there. And so, you know, you can't say good for Pete Hegseth. You can just say, I'm glad that he's not getting charged with something that he's innocent of. And once again, another high-level case that entirely damages the Me Too movement. Another example of why there needs to be some kind of lawful measure that can operate against having these kinds of accusations. There has to be. Otherwise, there's no risk, no reward. Like, it's like, I didn't lose anything, but like this guy's entire reputation is burned, right? It's boomed. Not now, obviously. I mean, to a lot of people it will be, because how many people do you think will go into a very in-depth reading of what actually occurred? You're going to get, and this is why you get like The View, right? The View has to read like segments off every other day that kind of like, because they operate as a news media, a conglomerate, that they got to make sure they don't get sued for defamation, because they won't come back and correct. And so it's super unfortunate. The entire situation's unfortunate. The husband loses the most. The kids lose too. I can't imagine the husband will stay in that marriage. And if he does, I mean, good luck to that guy, because it's busted at this point. You know, what a devil woman. You're exactly right. And that's why it's got to stop. There's got to be some measure, dude. Some measure that can kind of prevent against this stuff. Because outside of that, I don't know what prevents a woman from making these claims, especially when you have such a willing and like fiending group of like feminists who, like, at the drop of a hat, some guy gets into charge. It's immediately, that's the gospel, that's truth. Let's go attack him online nonstop. And let me just go back to this too. Like, so after reading all of this and seeing everything that occurred here, again, I'll go to this one right here. Look how vile that this will read, and I'll put it on screen here. Almost 2 million views on this, and it's not the only one. That this woman says that Pete Hegseth raped a married Christian Republican woman at an event while her husband frantically searched for her. MAGA thinks, MAGA thinks that's cool. What is this? What? MAGA thinks holding a woman down and raping her is what? It's like, you didn't even try to read. And if you did attempt to read, you didn't read anything at all. You opened the page and you read maybe like a couple words and said, that's too hard, I don't want to read this far. And then when you default to having to listen to left-wing pundits describe it, they probably didn't do the reading either. And they're just lying. It's why a serial rapist is their savior. What is this? What is this? And anyone who even knows the story about the Trumps issue is that the case with E. Jean Carroll against Donald Trump was literally read as if it was a Law and Order SVU like episode. It was like almost verbatim the way that it played out. That woman had like these crazy fantasies. But it's just like, it's insane, man. And how many people do you think are going to do the justice of like working through that and trying to enlighten themselves over what actually occurred in this situation? It happens too often, right? And that's why it's kind of annoying to think that the Republican Party tries to play to optics. It's like, who cares about optics, dude? The New York Times lies. Most of these left-wing pundits on X lie. MSNBC lie. Rachel Maddow lie. CNN lie. All of they do, like everything they do, lie. And they'll take it as far as they can because none of their people fact check. They are the party of the retarded. They are the party of the ill-read. And that's what we have to compete with. And it's unfortunate because the way that this system works is we all kind of got equal rights and equal say in these things. And it's just it's just so unfortunate. But that's really all I was going to cover today. It was going to be a pick back up to come to clean up from the episode that kind of had issues, latency issues last time. I appreciate everybody for being here and joining in. If you missed portions, you can go back. I felt like I did a pretty good reading of that report entirely. Colin Rugg has the text on X as well. I have a thread that kind of does a bit more short piece bites on this too that I quoted on X shortly before I went live as well. And there's going to be a little bit more coming out too, especially in regards with Hegseth's lawyer actually wanting to release a file on the accuser, Jane Doe, in this story, that may indicate that she also made another false accusation against another man. Now, if that's true, and there's a history, we can find this pattern here, dude, that woman's got to get thrown in jail for something, dude. Because that is like, you can't do that, dude. you can't just constantly do all these decisions. No responsibility, no morality. And these are the people who are at these high-level conferences at the Republican Party. And people want to come at me and say, man, Christianity can't come back in the Republican Party, yada, yada, yada. It's come on, man. What are we doing here? Well, that's it for today. Subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed the content, share it if you think I did a good job and people need to see this and I think I explained it pretty well. And for everybody who's here, I will be streaming with Worrell later today on jar openers. That will be at 6 p.m. on his channel and mine. We'll be co-streaming that one. And we have a Discord as well. You can find my X account in the YouTube video description. You can find our Discord, community Discord for jar openers in the description as well. And I think that's everything. I might be forgetting something. I always generally do. But I appreciate everybody for being here. And thanks once again. And I will see you guys later tonight. Peace out. Christ is King. And hopefully we can change the system the way it needs to be. But until next time, take care.